Yeah.
Well, I'd love to just understand, because obviously Asia's actually a little easier to understand than a lot of the records. So for the mixing on that record, was Elliot and Al, and did you mix some as well, or
Here's that story. When we
okay?
got done with the tracking, the boys came to me and said, we'd like you to mix. We're going to go off and do overdubs. It'll be a few months, but we'd like you to mix it. And I said, guys, I don't think I could mix with you. And why not? I said, I just think our mixing styles are too different. And he said, oh, come on. Yada, da. Well, you'll try, won't you? I said, sure, of course I'll try. I'd love to. And, you know, I would love to, but I had heard.
Yeah.
So anyway, 6 months later, Gary called and said, we've got one ready. And it was Josie, which really wasn't ready. It wasn't the finished version, as it turns out, but went into Cherokee on Fairfax. And I got a mix up that I was happy with. And they came in and it was like, wow, it sounds great. Let's try this. Okay. Let's try that. Okay. Let's try this and that. Okay. Let's try this minus that. Okay. And then it started, you know, and you know, I hate telling this story. It's not that I'm against experimentation. I just wish more. I just like it to be done in the recording process. It stems from the fact that, you know, like, you know, I like to mix. I had to adjust to mixing with automation. It helps you, and I didn't want any help.
Right.
But I found when it started getting out of hand, when we got to 48 track, you know, maybe you should consider automation, Bill. And, you know, yeah, maybe I better. And so ultimately I did, and I learned how to use it. But it wasn't fun because I wanted to mix for a performance. I wanted to, you know, sing the song with my hands. And so, you know, I knew this was never going to work, but I gave it the good old college try, and they saw that I was getting frustrated. And at the end, we shook hands, and I said, you know, I'm sorry, guys. I really wish I could do it. It's just not my style. And I really do wish I could have adjusted.
Right.
But they went off and did it with Elliot, and who did an okay job, and no, who did a phenomenal job, and who doesn't remember things correctly. And Elliot, if you're watching this, Elliot just did an interview I saw in print where he said I recorded 2 tracks. I think you need to think that over again. But anyway, there's 2 tracks I didn't do that they recut Peg.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, but here's a great story about Elliot mixing with them. And this says it all. This tells you the why. Let me just readjust here. Why it wouldn't work with me. So Kneecam, for those of you that don't know.
Crawling faders, yeah.
That Andrew just hit it on the nose. That, you know, look, it was better than nothing. Or was it? That's part of the problem for me adjusting to automation, because that was the automation I had to adjust to, and it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. It was inaccurate. It didn't come back the same. The faders were so clunky, they had no feel, but it was automation. And believe me, when a lot of producers, when it came out, you know, had to mix on a Neve with that because it was automated, and we'd keep our mix the same every pass. So we made a little change. We knew we were making a little change, whatever. So I don't know if it was Asia or not, but Elliot's mixing with them, and it is Kneecam. And they you know, they're doing all their experimentation, different things and whatnot, and who knows how many passes later. Elliot, for this pass, I want you to put your finger on that fader, and we'll run it down, and I want you to just think about moving it, okay?
And how'd that go?
Ask Elliot. I'm not sure, but when I heard that story, I went, yeah.
That's great.
It wasn't going to work.
So now Roger Nichols also has a credit on that record for like digital something executive engineering. So I'd love to understand a bit more about his role then. Like, when did I should know this already, but I don't. So he seemed to, certainly later on, he was sort of in the kind of not executive production at all, but executive engineering, I guess would be a decent title. He really oversaw, even though he didn't record all of it, he was the guy who knew where every tape was. He was the guy who would be the one flying things, putting takes together and stuff like that. Was he already involved to that extent back then?
Not even a little bit.
Okay.
I don't know what, he did overdubs, I think. I don't know what.
It's probably a credit from like a digital remaster from later on or something then. Because I mean, that's the other thing about the credits when you look online. You get every credit from every version all lumped in together. So
yeah. And they leave certain things off sometimes for who knows why. But anyway, no, the funny thing for me was it was the first Gadd day. And I wish I had notes of how far into the process that was, but it was the first Gadd day, and he showed up. I believe he was driving a Di Tommaso back then. He shows up, and they're doing a playback, and it was a small control room, so I had left the room. I was standing outside when he pulled in, and I walked up to him as he was coming out of his car. I walked up and said, "You got to come and listen to this drummer. The track that we just cut, this guy's unbelievable." And he didn't seem very interested. I don't know. And he didn't do anything. And he wasn't there all the time at all. In fact, that may have been the second day he was there or something, second time I saw him. So I don't know. But I think you're right. I think he became, Elliot would know. He became the guy that kept things technically together.
Right.
Kept track of tapes and who was doing what.
Yeah, which is a lot to do with those guys.
And he might have been the one for the song on Gaucho, the second, was it called the second arrangement, I believe?
Right, yeah.
The one that got erased.
Right, yes. Oh, right.
The second engineer doing, let me jump to that whole thing.
Okay.
When I said there's so many things I don't understand. So they do Asia, and they did a lot of things differently than they had ever done before, and it obviously has fantastic results. Most people, I wouldn't call it superstition in the record business, but you get, now they'd had a lot of good results too, but I hope everyone would agree that Asia was the best record by then. Some people might like Gaucho better, whatever, but it was the best record by then and different enough and everything. And here was this whole different kind of thing going on, how they did it with no drugs and very calm sessions and this and that. And what do you do for the next album? You change absolutely everything. Go to New York. You start trying to get, I thought the idea of using the different drummers was fun and it worked out really well.
Yeah.
So now we're gonna, as you know, what ended up happening then is they worked towards Wendell. They worked towards Roger being given $150,000 or something to build a computer that would play the drums for them, so they could put the backbeat wherever they wanted it.
Right.
And I'll never forget Jeff coming back to LA, and we had lunch, and he's telling me what he just went through, and he said, 11 hours I played, one day. He said, and I played with 3 different bands. And all, just to get the track out of me that they wanted. And then they would overdub everything to that drum track. I mean, the tracks that I cut are all intact. I mean, with the drummers and stuff. And it's not that bad, folks.
Yeah, well.
But they went on into this perfection thing that just, beyond. And it just seems odd to me that, you change everything up. You think you'd want to keep the same formula.
Yeah, in a way, but I think it's also, I have no idea what the situation was in this particular case, but I think it speaks to the confidence as musicians to think, well, we don't need, it's us, so we can do this in any way we want, and it will still be Steely Dan, and we will end up with something. So it shows a hell of a lot of trust in themselves too.
Yeah.
Which,
yeah.
That's hard. I mean, I'm not confident in that way at all. If I find something that works, I beat it into the ground until it's really obvious that it's not working anymore. And usually someone has to tell me it's not working anymore.
Well, artists in general, real artists want to change things up, and for sure, you don't want to make the same record the rest of your life and all that kind of thing. But like I said, it's just it's just such a different approach on so many aspects. It just seemed odd to me. And then of course things beyond their control. I mean, that album Gaucho was played with so many problems. Obviously, the fans will all tell you, just terrible problems. Being hit by a taxi, I think, fortunately, Walter being hit by a taxi being maybe the funniest. He wasn't hurt that bad, but his girlfriend overdosing, not so much.
Yeah, that's not good.
Terrible stuff. But that you reminded me of something a little bit earlier when we were talking about Jeff. This is funny. So on Asia, not every song, but almost every song, they came in with a demo, and the demo was just, of all things, their two instruments, piano and bass, in almost every case. Sometimes with a vocal or a la da 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 vocal or whatever and whatnot, and they play it for the band, and that's in I think in every case it was already in the pretty much. I mean, the form I think was set out. There was some room for change, but I think Carlton did, I think, most of the charts, but they were anyway. Whoever did them, because Omardian did some too. They were definitely off of those demos that they did, and more than once, the someone in the band reading his chart, the thing's playing along, and it ends, and I go, guys, that sounds incredible. Why don't you just overdub the drums? Transfer that to 24 track, overdub the drums. You're done. No. We'll get it better. Okay. So something like after the release of Asia, 6-9 months, pretty close, I think, as I recall, Gary calls me and says, we're doing a song for a movie. I want to cut it with you. Okay. Producers again? Sure. So we met with similar band, Keltner on drums, and played the demo. The guys learned it. We cut a track. I sent them on their way. And I found out that down the road, they weren't so happy with the track. And what did they do? They took the demo and they overdubbed Jeff Beccaro.
Right.
And that's FM. And, I mean, that's a cute story in itself. But what's the most amazing thing to me is that, Jeff was, you'd never know he was a perfectionist, but inside of him he was. And he actually said, I believe it's in print, the only time he's ever liked what he played was on that overdub.
Wow.
That's deep.
On FM, because he's played some stuff.
I know,
that guy.
Believe me.
Good God.
I'm fortunate to have recorded a lot of them. But I mean, yeah, and to a click, no less.
Yeah. To a demo. That's